Let's go back in time. It's 1953 in East Harlem, New York. My mom and dad were discussing their upcoming wedding. They found their apartment, the church was set, everything looked good. They realized that working and shaping at the docks was not secure enough. Dad needed something more steady, with benefits. Then one day, while sitting on the stoop of their brownstone, a friend walked by. He told him he was heading down to civil service to pick up an application for the postal service. Want me to grab an extra one for you? Yeah, pick up all they have. The friend returned with applications for the post office, the sanitation, fire, and police departments. Dad chose the NYPD. Applications were filled out and sent in. The interviews, physicals, and psychological tests were finished. Dad was accepted into the 1953 Spring Academy class of the New York City Police Department, along with a few pals from the neighborhood. Then Mom and Dad were married in October of the same year. The rest is NYPD and cinematic history. Fast forward to 1961. Dad, Mom, and their 4 children, one was just an infant, prepared for a move to Long Island. 4 children in a small 2-bedroom Bronx apartment wasn't cutting it anymore. Actually, a bunch of NYPD officers were making the same move. Dad was happily assigned to East Harlem neighborhoods when he went on the job. It was almost too easy. He was home. He knew the neighborhoods, the people, those who belonged there and those who didn't. Everything was falling into place for the Grosso family. Life was good. He proudly walked his beat, checked on everyone, and walked it alone. He was reassigned from patrol to special details with another officer named Eddie Egan. Egan was a bit of a maverick too. He didn't like partners, and had no trouble letting them know it either. Against all odds, these 2 mavericks developed a relationship, then a bond, and finally a partnership that would last forever and shake the criminal world to its core. They became leaders in the department in arrests and were assigned to the Plain Clothes Unit, later known as the Street Crime Unit, and again led the department in narcotics arrests. Sonny and Eddie were shaking up a local Harlem bar known for heavy narcotics activity. One suspect tried to run, but they gave chase and cornered him. The suspect swung a hidden knife at Dad and slashed his hand. Eddie took him for stitches and then out to the Copacabana in Manhattan for a much-needed drink. While in the Copa, they caught eye of a table filled with known and unknown drug connections, and one unknown Italian male throwing money around like he had his own mint. Their investigative instincts were in high alert. They decided to follow him and see where he goes. As explained in Robin Moore's novel and later in William Friedkin's film, both titled The French Connection, their instincts were remarkably on the money. No pun intended.
I was 7 years old and oblivious to what was going on outside of our tree-lined neighborhood. All I knew was that Dad no longer wore a uniform and was away more than usual. Every once in a while, Dad would say, "Take a ride with me," and I would go. I would ask where we were going, and he would ask if it mattered. I would say not really, and that would be that. We usually ended up at a school somewhere. He would meet the janitor, and I would be allowed in the gym and play basketball for a few hours. Pretty cool. Soon, though, I became bored playing alone all the time. Soon my sisters would come, or my cousins, or some of the other cops' kids, and we would have a blast. Then one day, it was just me and Dad. No gym this time, though. He led me into a basement of the school, down a very dark corridor, and into a dimly lit small room that smelled like piss.
It was there that I learned about wiretaps. Dad taught me how the rotary phones, when dialed, sent out electrical spikes that would print out in correspondence to the number dialed. My job was to count the strikes and write the number above its patch. In other words, a patch of 8 strikes would be an 8. 6 strikes was a 6, and so forth. When the strike stopped, I had to write out the entire phone number dialed on a pad. It was a blast.
Of course, I had no idea I was the youngest person working on the soon-to-be infamous French Connection case. I would hound him daily, especially when school was on break, to go with him. Looking back now, it was the perfect cover for him. The scenery would change so as not to be seen too many times.
Eventually, we were positioned in the basement of a brownstone, across from the carriage bicycle room the projects had in the basement. It was down the street from the school where we played basketball, and sometimes I would be given time off and play in the gym with my sisters and/or whoever else came along with us.
One particular time, we went there on a Sunday afternoon. My partner and I went into the room where I went to work on the strikes, and Dad had his headphones on, listening to the tapes. Everything was normal until Dad ripped off the headphones, jumped up, turned out the light, and told me not to move a muscle. He exited the room and disappeared into the darkness.
I crawled along the floor and pushed the door open slightly. I could see my dad bent over and walking with a limp, looking like an old man. Then the basement door opened and I saw Dad pull his gun out of his waist. A silhouette of a man walked in. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid that they would hear it. I heard the mumbling of a conversation and then the silhouette left. Dad came into the room, scooped up some stuff and said, "Let's go," telling me to stay behind him all the way to the car. The ride home back to Long Island was very silent. I would find out many years later that while Dad was listening to the phone call, he heard the suspect say something about being suspicious of the same car parked and someone in the basement of the building across the street. Our building, where we were sitting in. Well, needless to say, that was my last day as Special Officer Grosso. The silhouette was the actual target of the investigation, and he had come to check us out. Dad was thinking quick that day. When the suspect entered, Dad acted like an old man who was lost in the basement and looking for the door to get out. The suspect bought the act and we were safe. That man was Patsy, last name redacted. He was a soldier in the Lucchese crime family and the direct connection to the French Connection from Marseille, France. Holy shit. The case was broken by Dad and Eddie in 1962, and it stood as the largest drug bust in NYPD history for decades. In 1967, Dad and Eddie were contacted by Robin Moore about writing a book about the case. Moore had written the blockbuster novel The Green Berets, which became a blockbuster film of the same name. So Dad and Eddie were flown to Jamaica to Moore's home overlooking Montego Bay, and that is how the book was written. Story over? Not even close. In 1967, Dad was contacted by Phil D'Antoni, a major Hollywood producer famous for films like Bullet with Steve McQueen and the most famous car chase ever filmed, also films such as This Proud Land and Elizabeth Taylor in London. D'Antoni was eager to make a movie based on Dad and Eddie's case eloquently memorialized in Robin Moore's book. Dad and Phil secured a sought-after director named William Friedkin. The three became lifelong friends with Dad and Phil, eventually becoming partners. Friedkin filmed many scenes of the award-winning film without permits, but with the help of Dad and Eddie, they got away with it. Barely. Including the heralded car chase scene, which almost made Bullet's chase scene look like the soapbox derby. After The French Connection, Dad and Phil partnered together on films The 7 Ups, written by Dad, which had a car chase scene equal to The French Connection. They also collaborated on TV movies and series like Mr. Inside, Mr. Outside, Strike Force, Rubber Gun Squad, and Making the Connection, also written by Dad with some help from me. In 1974, Dad retired from the NYPD and spent the next 30 years making films, television series, and specials. A funny anecdote to this story: when The French Connection won 6 Academy Awards, I picked up my friend Kevin and went speeding up and down Hempstead Turnpike, beeping my horn, mimicking the chase scene from The French Connection. I got pulled over by Nassau County Highway Patrol, and after explaining why I was speeding, I told him about the Academy Awards. He told me to go home and celebrate in my driveway before I kill someone. He was right, and I did as I was told. There were many people involved in the actual case, and Dad brought many of them along with him on his second career. He stayed true blue even as he went to the big precinct in the sky. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Don't forget to subscribe and share and hit the like button. Remember, be safe, be smart, and behave.